I would like to welcome all staff, students, parents, and especially our special guest, Dr. Neil McNeil, Principal, Lecturer, and RSL member. Mr. David Koch, the Head of Student College Council, and Ms. Rita Savioti, MLA, Member of West Swan. Today as a school, we recognise the efforts of Australian and New Zealanders who lost their lives at war. ANZAC Day goes beyond the anniversary of the landing on Gallipoli in 1915. It is the day we remember all Australians who served and died in all wars, conflicts and peacekeeping operations. The spirit of ANZAC, with its human qualities of courage, mateship and sacrifice, continues to have meaning and relevance for our national identity. Today as a school, we recognise the efforts of Australian and New Zealanders who lost their lives at war. ANZAC Day goes beyond the anniversary of the landing on Gallipoli in 1915. It is the day we remember all Australians who served and died in all wars, conflicts and peacekeeping operations. The spirit of ANZAC, with its human qualities of courage, mateship and sacrifice, continues to have meaning and relevance for our national identity. All to please stand quietly while the concert band leads the singing of the national anthem.
Dr. Neil McNeil was called up for national service as a 19-year-old and he entered the Army in January 1967. He did recruit training at Puckapunyal, corps training at the School of Artillery in Manly, unit training at 131 Divisional Locating Unit at Holsworthy, Vietnamese language training at 1 Division Intelligence, jungle training at Canberra in Queensland, and then flew to Vietnam in September 1967. He fought in the heavy battles in Bien Hoa province in 1968. Dr. McNeil chairs the Veterans Children's Education Board, he edits the Vietnam Veterans Newsletter, and he is secretary of the Ellenbrook RSL. He is also a school principal and a adjunct lecturer at Curtin University.
Good morning, boys and girls. Don't need to answer. Can I just say that ANZAC Day ceremony is a major occasion for returned soldiers and sailors and air people. And on this Remembrance Day, we actually stop and remember the past and also consider the future as well. What I wanted to do today was to talk to you about the concept of ANZAC. And I read back, I think, because I've been there, I actually read back and think, what in the story of ANZAC is mythology and what's true? And you read the stories of heroism from the First World War, and you stand there in amazement, because they were just ordinary people, just like you. In fact, some people actually became soldiers at 16, 15 or 16 years old, and went and served. And I think the stories that struck me as a kid was that the generals who ran the army at that particular time didn't have a great respect for human lives. And so they would call everyone ready for attack, and they'd all stand up, jump over the edge of the trench, and attack a machine gun, and lo and behold, most of them would be dead. And the people's generosity with other people's lives was something that shocked me, but in fact, as I look back through this, I saw that even though most of the people knew they were going to probably die or be wounded, they actually obeyed the orders to attack. And I found this little story from the story of ANZAC, and I thought what I'll do is read it to you and relate it to something reasonably modern. And I think what I found was the story, you may remember that next year will be the 100th anniversary of the Australian fleet sailing to the Middle East in 1914, and the last place they saw was Albany. So next year we're going to have a big convoy arrive in Albany towards the end of the year just to commemorate that 100th anniversary. And the following year, 2015, will be the 100th anniversary of ANZAC. And so that's really big for us. But at ANZAC Cove, basically on 2 days after they landed on the 25th, and on the 27th, half of each battalion was dead. Because when they were landed off the ships. It was a really dark night and they could scarcely see, but the Turks had little ports all along, lots of machine guns, and the Turkish army, where the Australians landed, was commanded by a really inspiring Turk later on called Kemal Atatürk. And he said to each man, basically, your job is to die for Turkey, and the people who come after you will be really appreciative. And so the Australians landed under fire on that particular night and suffered terrible casualties. And what they said, so that basically a battalion is around about 700, and so half of them lay dead after 3 days, so probably about a quarter away down here, all you guys were being dead after the first day, which is not good. And because of the ferocity of the battle, they couldn't recover the dead bodies, so the dead bodies were lying there for 3 days, no one could move. And they decided that they would attack anyway, so they kept attacking. But what this writer wanted to investigate was what actually drove the Australians on. And he said it was not the love of the fight, because Australians love fighting more than most people. It was an occupation from which glamour quickly wears. It was not hatred of the Turks, nor was it purely patriotism, because they were fighting for their own soil. Nor was it a desire for fame, which made them steer a course so straight in the hour of critical trial. They knew too well the chance that their families, and probably the men beside them, would not ever know how they died. What was it? What was the dominant motivation that drove these soldiers onwards? And it lay with the courage of the soldiers themselves, to be the sort of man who would not give way when his mates were trusting his firmness. And it was a sort of spirit about not letting down your mates, I think, and it's something that's sort of gone right through Australian society. Life was very dear, but life was not worth living unless they could be true to Australian ideals. Standing upon that alone, when hope failed or hope faded, when the end loomed near in front of them, when the whole world seemed to crumble and the heaven about to fall, the typical Australian was seldom religious in the sense of the word, but they all held a prevailing creed, and that was, inherited from the gold miners and the bushmen, that you would never let your mates down. It's bred into every child and stays with him and her throughout their lives. In the last few moments before the bloody attack on Lone Pine at Gallipoli, when 3 Battalion was about to attack, and they were in trenches, and they were getting ready to go over the top, they called over the top, men would go along and ask, is my mate Jim here? And they would move up and make sure that they stood beside them, because they knew that the moment of the attack, if something happened, they would want to be with their friends. And so they'd say, do you mind shifting up a bit? And in English, they wouldn't expect you guys to use. Him and me are mates, we're going over together. But the same thing happened dozens of times over. And the strongest bond in the Australian Imperial Force was between a man and his mate. No matter how hardened a sinner against camp rules or in the hotel, Australians never seemed to fail on the self-imposed duty of standing by their wounded mates. And what I wanted to do was probably relate that to an example I knew reasonably well of a bloke called Dasher Wheatley. And Dasher Wheatley won the Victoria Cross in Vietnam. And his story was, and he was probably no different to you guys. Dasher Wheatley was born in Sydney in 1937. He was educated at Maroubra Technical School in Sydney, In the old days, the kids either went in a professional stream or a technical stream. So if you're going to be a brickie or an electrician, you went off to a technical school. So he went to a technical school, and then he decided he was going to join the army. So he joined 3 Battalion and went to Malaya. After the Second World War, Australia was involved in lots of little wars. So the Second World War finished in 1945. Then in 1952, Australia served in Korea, so the Forgotten War. And then we were involved in Malaya, and then a strange little secret war almost in Borneo called Confrontation or Konfrontasi. And then we were straight into Vietnam. So he served in Malaya in 3 Battalion, and then he joined the Australian Army Training Team. The Australian Army Training Team was they picked the best sergeants and warrant officers out of most of the units and sent them to support the Vietnamese army units, which were just still learning how to be soldiers, I suppose. Arriving in Vietnam in 1965, he spent 6 months with the Vietnamese battalion at Quang Tri and was then posted to Cha Bong with 5 other Australians in Quang Ngai province. And the Australian Army Training Team was working with a group of Vietnamese who lived in the mountains, and they were called Montagnards, which just means mountain people. The Vietnamese called them Moi, which means savages. And in these camps, if you ever saw them, they were strange. They weren't set up like army camps. People had all their families there, so there'd be a bit of barbed wire, and there'd be whole bands and cooking fires all over the place. And so they were trying to train these Montagnards to be professional soldiers. And in difficult battles, people were only being paid, I don't know, $3 to $5 a month or something like that, really poor pay. And so they tossed up, it's worthwhile dying for this or am I going home? And often in battles they decided it's far better to go home. And so the Australian, the AATTB was trying to train these people to become better soldiers, I suppose. And they're on patrol doing search and destroy. And they're crossing an area of dry paddy field. Paddy just means rice field. And paddy fields are not great places to be because there's no cover. They're on flat country and they're attacked by a Vietcong force from a nearby hillside. And of course they had no cover. And the problem for Dasher Wheatley was that his mate, Warrant Officer Swanton, got hit in the chest with a round, and they couldn't get him out. And the problem was, particularly for these troops working with the Montagnards, that the helicopters or the medevacs were really reluctant to come. And the other problem you have is, if you're in a battle, it's called a hot extraction. The helicopters, the medevac helicopters aren't armed, and they won't come in to a hot extraction generally. So Swanton had been hit in the chest, usually fatal, and they didn't know what to do. The Vietnamese pulled back across the paddy field, and Dasher Wheatley decided he would grab his mate, picked up his mate, left his weapon and radioed behind with the Vietnamese, and dragged his mate into the bush, and just took out 2 hand grenades and waited. And one of the Vietnamese privates said later that he heard hand grenades go off and gunshots. And next morning, the Australians did clearing patrols and found Dasher Wheatley and Warrant Officer Swanton both dead from gunshot wounds. But the Australian government decided that that was an act of bravery which personified the Australian ideal of looking after your mates. And you probably couldn't ask for a greater sacrifice than the one that Dasher Wheatley made. And he won a Victoria Cross for that. And is one of the 3 legends from the AATTB in the Vietnam Times. And to finish off, I'd just like to say to you that when you're doing sport at school, all the team sports, footy, netball or whatever, hockey, all about encouraging you to start to consider other people and the skills and qualities which will serve you well for life, because you need to look beyond yourselves and look, how do I look after other people as well? So I thought the Dash Weekly story particularly was relevant to you, and just to say, if you can play team sports, a great training for you. And another reminder from us is that we do a dawn service on the 25th over at the amphitheatre by GA, and you're more than welcome to attend. Thank you very much for listening.
I would now like to introduce Adelle Brown, who is going to be singing with the Band Played Waltzing Matilda.
Now when I was a young man, I carried me back, and I lived the free life far away. From the Murray's basin to the dusty outback, I waltzed my Matilda all the way. Then in 1915, my country said, son, it's time to stop rambling, there's work to be done. So they gave me a tin hat and they gave me a gun, and they sent me away to the war. And the band played waltzing Matilda as the ship rode away from the quay, and amidst all the cheers, the flag waving and tears, we sailed off above Italy. And well I remember that terrible day, how my blood stained the sand and the water, and of how in that helmet they called to the bay, we were butchered like lambs at slaughter. Johnny Davy was fighting, he primed and sang well, he shot us with bullets, rained us with shell, and in 5 minutes flat he gone us all to hell, nearly blew us right back to Australia. But the band won't sing Matilda, and they carried us down the gangway. Oh, but nobody cheered, they just stood and stared, and they turned all their faces away. But they all been much lonely, all stiff and scarred. They tied on heroes from the forgotten war, and the young people asked for love, they marching far. And I ask myself the same question. But the band was waltzing Matilda, and the old men still answer the call. But as year follows year, our romantics appear, singing no one will march there at all. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, who come waltzing Matilda with me, and their bones may be heard as they climb by that wall. Mama waltzing Matilda with me.
Anzac Day by D. Hunter. I saw a kid marching with medals on his chest. He marched alongside diggers marching 6 abreast. He knew that it was Anzac Day, he walked along with pride. He did his best to keep in step with diggers by his side. And when the march was over, the kid
They belonged to Daddy, but he did not come back. He died up in New Guinea along a lonely jungle track. The kid looked rather sad, and a tear came to his eye. The digger said, "Don't cry, my son, and I'll tell you why. Your daddy marched us today, all the blooming way. Us diggers know that he was here. It's like this on Anzac Day." The kid looked rather puzzled and didn't understand, but the digger went on talking and started to wave his hand. For this great land we live in, there's a price we have to pay. We all love fun and merriment in this country where we live. The price was that some soldiers' precious life must give. For you to go to school, my lad, and worship God at will, someone had to pay the price, so the diggers paid the bill. Your daddy died for us, my son, for all things good and true. I wonder if you understand the things I've said to you. The kid looked up to the digger, just for a little while, and with a changed expression said with a lovely smile, "I know my dad marched here today. This is Anzac Day. I know he did, all the bloomin' way." I would now like to introduce the senior choir to perform Nearer Still Nearer, conducted by Megan Weaver. Tradition of the Anzac is to lay wreaths to commemorate the fallen soldiers. During the First World War, red poppies were among the first plants to spring up in the devastated battlefields of northern France and Belgium. In soldiers' folklore, the vivid red of the poppy came from the blood of their comrades soaking through the ground. The sight of poppies on the battlefield in 1915 moved Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae to write the poem in Flanders Fields. And so now, we as a community lay wreaths and poppies to commemorate the fallen Anzacs.
The last toast is one of a number of bugle calls in military tradition which marks the phases of the day. Where reveille signalled the start of the soldier's day, a last toast signalled its end. It is believed originally to have been part of a more elaborate routine known in the British Army as tattoo, that had its origins in the 17th century. During the evening, a duty officer had to do the rounds of his unit's positions, checking that the sentry posts were manned and rounding up the off-duty soldiers and packing them off to their beds or billets. He would be accompanied by one or more musicians. The first post was sounded when the duty officer started his rounds, and another bugle call was sounded when the party completed its rounds. When they reached the last post, this signalled that the night sentries were alert at their posts and gave one last warning to any soldiers still at large that it was time to retire for the evening. The last post was incorporated into funeral and memorial services as its final farewell and symbolises that the duty of the dead is over.
They can rest in peace. Please stand quietly for the last post.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget. I would now like to introduce Kendra Fewster to perform the piece Green Fields of France.
Well, how
do, private William McBride. Do you mind if I sit here down by your graveside and rest for a while in the warm summer sun? I've been walking all day and I'm nearly done. I see by your gravestone you were only 19 when you joined the Great Fallen in 1960. Well, I hope you died quick and I hope you died clean. Oh, Willie McBride wasn't so an obscene. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the pipe slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered down? Did the band play the last verse and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the chorus? Did you leave a wife or sweetheart behind? In some loyal heart is your memory enshrined. And though you died back in 1916, to that loyal heart you're forever 19. Or are you a stranger without even a name, forever enshrined behind some lost pain? In an old photograph, all tattered and stained, and faded to yellow in the brown leather frame. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the pipe slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the chorus? The sun shining down on these green fields of France. The warm wind blows gently and the revelries dance. The churches have vanished long under a cloud. No gas, no barbed wire, no guns fire now. But here this graveyard is still a man's land. The countless white crosses in muteness stand. To man's blind indifference to his fellow man, and a whole generation that will butcher to death. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the pipe slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the chorus? And I can't help but wonder, oh, William McBride, do all those who lie here know why they died? Did you really believe them when they told you the the flowers of the forest. Oh, delights, lay the flowers of the forest.
That concludes our formal ceremony for today. I'd like to invite our special guests to leave. Students, you need to remain seated silently while they leave.
There are many occasions when I know it's a great privilege to be principal of this school. This assembly has been one of those occasions. All those who performed, all those who participated, to all of you who so respectfully engaged with this assembly. Thank you very much. You've done you and Ellenbrook Secondary College an enormous service, and you deserve to be very proud of the way you held yourself together with this assembly. Thank you very much on behalf of the good community. We now need to move, when I let you know, to your form class to collect your bags and then move to your period 2 class, please. And because the door on that side of the assembly area is closed, it'll be a bit of a squeeze. Would you please make sure that you make your way past the flagpole and the greens very carefully? And would Henley and Sterling please stand and quietly move out?